conversation with his constituents. And there are so many constituents, but more importantly, Congressman Scott, you have a lot of your friends. I see members of the Virginia Senate, Louise Lucas and others here. Just thank you all for being here. Let's have a great town hall meeting. And Congressman Scott, thank you for all you do for Virginia 3rd.
Good evening, everyone. It's so good to see so many smiling faces here in the great city of Norfolk. Welcome to none other than the town hall for our U.S. Congressman Bobby C. Scott. Let's give him a hand. Well, I was going to ask who I am. Well, my name is Eric LaBelle. I'm your local political and legal analyst. Some of you know me from the greatest HBCU right down the street. Behold. All right. And others know me from television and radio, which you can see me tomorrow night as we bring up the primary election results. So make sure you go out and vote. Make sure you vote. Your voice matters. Our democracy is worth it. You know, it's a town hall, but it's really the people's town hall, because I say this a lot, not because he's my friend, I've known him for a long time, but because he is. He's the smartest congressman on Capitol Hill. He actually reads the bills. and they ask him which way to vote. So we're excited to have you here tonight. There's going to be some great information that the congressman is going to share with everyone here, and you will have an opportunity. Again, this is the people's town hall. You will have an opportunity to ask your questions so that the congressman can respond to them. So I'll give out more in-depth instructions about that in just a moment, but you will have an opportunity to ask your questions. But right now, we're going to honor this great country, our country, with the Pledge of Allegiance by Ms. Lillian K. House, 7th grade honors student at the International Studies at Rosemont. Lillian, could you please come? Let's give her a hand as she comes. I'd like to recognize some of our special guests. All of you are special, but recognize some of our elected officials who are in the House tonight for this Norfolk Community People's Voice Town Hall. I'd like to recognize, first of all, again, once again, our Mayor Kenner Alexander of the great city of Norfolk. Also, from our U.S. Senator King's office, Ms. Diane Kaufman. Our state senator, Senator L. Louise Lucas, President Pro Tem of the General Assembly. Let's give her a hand. Also, representing the city of Norfolk in the council, Councilman J.P. Page, Ward 4. Also representing the city of Norfolk in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, Raman Fadahi, Commonwealth Attorney in the city of Norfolk. Also, from the great city of Portsmouth, we have Councilmember Vernon Tillage. We also have Mark Hookham from the Port City Council. And also from the great city of Chesapeake, we have Dr. Pat King from the Chesapeake City Council. Yes, City Council. And also from higher education, we have President Scott Miller from Virginia Wesleyan University. Are there any elected officials that I missed? Any elected officials that I missed? Would you please raise your hand or stand to be recognized? Who is that? Thank you so much. Well, once again, thank you so much for being here. We're going to turn it over now to the hands of our U.S. Congressman Bobby Scott for his presentation. Congressman Scott.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for your good work. Norfolk State and on the news, and I'll look for you tomorrow night.
Yes, sir.
There's a lot going on in Washington, and we're gonna start off with some budget issues, but most of the discussion will be on what's in the budget bill and a little bit about what's in the reconciliation bill. The two slightly different, but we'll focus mostly on those. We're gonna start off with the economy, if I can get this thing to work. There you go. Whoops. Average monthly job change by administration. We took great pride 4 years ago in the American Rescue Plan Act and getting the economy started. And the average jobs per month in the Biden administration, about 337,000 jobs per month for the entire 4 years, more jobs in 4 years than any president in the history of the United States. And you can see the previous first Trump administration ended up with a net deficit. At this point in the first Trump administration, that was before COVID, at this point Trump is up to about 500,000 jobs. Biden at that point was about 2 million jobs. So we're still behind on monthly jobs. A lot is said about the deficit. People talk about the deficit, and it's very frustrating as a Democrat, because if you look carefully at this chart, you'll notice that every Democratic president since Kennedy has left for the Republicans a better deficit than they inherited. Everyone without exception. And every Republican administration has left for the Democrats a worse deficit than they inherited, everyone without exception. And I say that because if you listen to the speeches, you would think it would be just the opposite. But we're starting off right now with a budget bill that's going to blow a hole in the deficit again. What I call the big ugly billionaires budget bill, or that beautiful bill, or whatever you want to call it, just the facts. $1 trillion of tax giveaways to the wealthiest earners, an average tax cut of over $250,000 to the richest 0.1%. 16 million people across the United States will lose their health insurance, 11 million of those on Medicaid. 3 million people will lose SNAP benefits entirely in an average month. $2.4 trillion added to the deficit compared to just going home and doing nothing. And $1,600 a year would be lost by the lowest income households. This chart shows which 10th income bracket you happen to be in. If you're in the lowest 10%, you'll notice that you're actually worse off after this bill passes than you were to begin with, and the highest, you are significantly better off, in which actually you have to get to about the 40th percentile to break even. And that is because you lose so much benefits that the little tax benefits don't even compensate for. And you can see when it's described as tax cuts for the wealthy. This is the chart that shows what we're talking about. The bill raises costs for students trying to go to college. I know Dr. Miller's here, and you take interest in this because it cuts Pell Grants. Over 4 million students will have their Pell Grants reduced or eliminated if the bill passes. The way it's constructed with the Pell Grant and the student loans, most people will not be able to cover their full costs, which means they either can't go to college or they end up in predatory private loans, not the federal loans. After they leave college, the repayment plan will be a lot more expensive than they are today, than they were when this administration took over. It eliminates a lot of protections for students. There are a couple of protections. The 90-10 rule says that if a college can't get at least 10% of its money from other than federal sources, it can't participate in the student loan and Pell Grant program. That has eliminated a lot of the very low quality programs that nobody wanted to go to. And that 90-10 rule is eliminated. There are also bar defense and closed school discharge. If you're in a school that defrauded you, and it can be shown that you were defrauded, they lied to you about placement rates and that kind of thing, you can advance the bar defense. Or if a school just up and closed in the middle of the year, you can be protected by the closed school discharge and not have to pay your student loan. That is, unless this bill passes, those defenses evaporate. You've been defrauded or the school closes midterm, you gotta pay the loan back anyway. It also punishes schools whose graduates are struggling to pay their loans back. And there are a couple of details on that leave a lot to be desired, but a lot of the colleges will be at a lot disadvantage from where they are now. It has a private school voucher program, $20 billion in tax benefits estimated for those that, it's a tax credit scheme. You pay your voucher, you pay your tuition or you make your donation, and you get a 100% tax credit for your donation, which essentially you're paying for your education with federal money. The problem with this is that students that go take advantage of this will go to private schools that do not have Title VI protection under the Civil Rights Act, protecting you from discrimination by race, color, and national origin. Title IX, with protection for sex discrimination. Title 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, protecting students with disabilities. And only private secular schools must comply with Title III of the Americans with Disabilities Act. One of the problems with when you lose your Medicaid or SNAP, as this bill does, you also lose your automatic entitlement to free school lunch. Right now, if you're on either one, you just say you're on it and you get free school, you're automatically qualified. If you've lost that insurance, you've got to figure out how to get qualified on income and turn in all the paperwork. A lot of people will lose their access to free lunch because they have lost their Medicaid or SNAP benefits. The Urban League estimates that changes to SNAP alone would mean that 7.5 million students are at risk of losing their access to free meals. The Medicaid, 16 million people will lose their health insurance. This does not stop people from getting sick. They go to the hospital, don't pay. Everybody else's insurance will have to go up a little bit to cover that. Now, one thing we keep hearing from people is that when they say 11 million people lose their Medicaid, you also hear from the other side that they didn't cut Medicaid for any vulnerable population. CBO says it's 11 million, which is about 1 out of 7 people on Medicaid today. What they have done is installed what's called work requirement. Now, the people who do not work will lose their insurance, but most people work and would still be qualified. A few people will lose insurance that way. The vast majority of people that lose their insurance with a work requirement are those who are somehow exempt, like if you're sick in a nursing home or you're actually working. The paperwork will disqualify you. For example, if you are working and your boss doesn't fill out the paperwork, you lose your health coverage. If you are in a nursing home and your doctor's on vacation when the paperwork is due, you lose your health coverage. The CBO, Congressional Budget Office, has studied where they have had these work requirements, and as they have estimated with confidence that 11 million people will lose their Medicaid coverage because of the work requirement. Now, you can say you didn't cut for an individual, but the fact of the matter is 11 million people, by the time the dust settles, will be without health coverage. So you can judge it, and people can say, well, we didn't cut for any individual, just get your paperwork done. But the paperwork is so onerous that's what's going to happen. And by the way, the money you save for people who actually didn't work is offset by the number of people that you have to hire to keep up with the paperwork for everybody that actually is working, or they're disabled and can't work. And so the savings is in the paperwork disqualifying people that ordinarily should have stayed on Medicaid. 11 million people, it's 1 out of 7 people on Medicaid. Let's see, whoops, I'm going the wrong way. There are a couple other provisions in the bill. There is one microscopic good part of the bill, and that is what we call short-term Pell. Right now, the Pell Grant can only be used for courses in college that essentially lead to a college degree. If you have a course that will lead to a good job, but not to a college degree, can't use the Pell Grant. I think a lot of people, including myself, think that's ridiculous. If it in fact will lead to a good job, you ought to be able to use the Pell Grant, get that skill, transform your life. We've been working on that. As a matter of fact, we've gotten it passed twice in the House and previous Congresses, and that is in the bill. It's not the version that I would have preferred because it doesn't have some of the safeguards in it, but if we can get it passed, we can come back and put the safeguards in later. But that would allow people to take courses like welding or other courses like that that can significantly increase their income. The community colleges have a lot of courses like this. They may cost $500, $1,000, or $3,000. You've seen the studies that show that most families can't come up with $400 in an emergency. Well, if the course costs $3,000 and can double your income, you don't have $3,000 and you can't take advantage of that course. With short-term Pell in this bill, that will change and people will be able to transform their lives, and that is one good part of the bill. Another part for Hampton Roads is the increase in defense spending, particularly the increase in submarine construction. We have a deal with Australia where we're going to be building new submarines, and submarine construction will be increased under the bill. A couple of provisions that aren't so hot. One is it strips federal courts essentially of their right to impose contempt of court citations for people that violate court orders. That provision is going under some changes in the Senate right now, so we're not sure exactly how it's going to end up. One transformation was they eliminated that provision, but replaced it with a provision that required you to get in order to get into court, you have to post a bond in case you lose all of the expenses that the federal government may go through defending the case. That could be millions, could be billions. And so in order to get in there right now, there are at least 50 injunctions about illegal things this administration is trying to do. There are at least 50 injunctions pending right now. I doubt if any of those cases could have been brought if you had to post that kind of bond. So that provision is very problematic and will essentially allow an administration to break the law without any court being able to have the jurisdiction to do anything about it. That hopefully will not survive in the Senate, but that is in the bill right now, and it is in the bill as it passed the House. Also, there's a provision that prohibits states from regulating artificial intelligence, AI, for 10 years. Now, we don't know what AI is going to be able to do or not do, or whether or not get information and use information, how different people can use it, whether or not if you're doing it for employment, whether or not it has, the algorithm discriminates one way or the other. It just prohibits states from regulating AI at all for 10 years. I think that's very problematic, because we may find that there's a lot of areas where state legislators want to get in and slow things up a little bit. But that's in the bill right now. AI could make decisions on your health care, your employment, and everything else. And states can't do anything about it if this provision stays in the bill. So that's what's in the bill. Again, the House bill would take health care. The basic overview is that cuts in SNAP, $300 billion, cuts in Medicaid and Affordable Care Act, about $800 billion, total about $1.1 trillion, which is exactly the tax cuts for people with incomes above $500,000, $1.1 trillion. And the chart on the right shows essentially the more you make, the more you get out of it. And that chart does not include what you lose by virtue of losing benefits. So just to boil it down to the 3rd District, 25,000 people who receive coverage under the Affordable Care Act could see their premiums go up by about $800 a year. 250,000 people could lose their Medicaid. Over 120,000 people who count on SNAP could have those benefits threatened. Almost 25,000 students who use Pell Grants will see those benefits cut, and 450,000 students across the Commonwealth could see their free school lunches in jeopardy. So that's where we are in the bill. In the reconciliation package, there's another thing called the rescission package, which is a separate bill to save money. DOGE has gone around and cut some funding. They recognize that you can't cut funding if the bill is passed, the program is authorized, and the funding has been passed. The president is required by the Constitution to faithfully execute the laws and run the program. What they want to do is stop and not spend the money. Well, you can do that if you have a rescission bill which lists the money you don't want to spend, Congress passes it, and then they don't have to spend it. They're actually jumping the gun a little bit and not spending it without the rescission package. But in this, they have a rescission package on things that have been passed, about $9 billion worth. Public television and radio, those that listen to WHRO have heard of that. Funding for Ukraine, funding for foreign aid, and democracy programs and programs like that. Cuts in international AIDS prevention, PEPFAR, which has been credited with saving about 25 million lives, is in jeopardy, and access to clean water programs. A lot of these programs are in the rescission package, $9.4 billion, and the additional debt run up in the budget part is about $2.5 trillion, And all of this in the rescission is 9.4 billion. So you can see that if they're saying they're doing something to save money, it's not saving money anywhere near the order of magnitude that it would take to offset the additional debt in the bill. And so that's how you get in touch with us and how you get in touch with us. And we are now ready for the opportunity to ask questions.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Let me give a few instructions here. Thank you again for the presentation. If you could you go back to the slide where it impacts the Commonwealth of Virginia, 3rd Congressional District? Because I want our citizens to actually see the impact right there. So this is the impact of elections. Elections have consequences. And this is what is currently in the Senate. So if you don't have any questions now, hopefully you'll have some in just a moment. But you were given a card, each of you, when you came in the door. If you have a question, please write it on there, pass it to one of the staff members. They will then provide it to me. I'll randomly pull a name out of the box for cards, for questions. Then afterwards, there's a microphone. We have 2 staff members that will come to you so that you can ask that question. So whatever question you have, please get it to the staff members so that I can then pose your question to the congressman so that he can answer it. Anyone with a question, let me know. What? If you didn't get a card, then you just raise your hand. I'm sorry. We do have. So with that, Congressman, while we get the questions here, there's one, while you were speaking, right now this bill is in the Senate. What is the likelihood that the Senate will change some of these harmful provisions in this big, ugly billionaire budget bill?
I think some of the provisions will necessarily be changed because some of the provisions are procedurally violate what's called the Byrd Rule. They do more than it's just more than just money. If it's too much policy, the parliamentarian will rule it out of order. They have to take those provisions out in order to maintain the posture of a bill that can pass on a simple majority without going through a filibuster. So I think there are a few provisions, and we're hoping the court provision and the AI provision will get caught up in that and not be able to survive the Senate. But we don't know. But it would be shocking if the bill went through without any changes at all. Which means that it has to come back to the House for an additional vote to ratify the amendments, because the bill to pass has to pass the House and the Senate in exactly the same form.
All right. Wayne Davis and James M. Davis. Wayne Davis of Portsmouth and James M. Davis of Lynchburg. Could you please stand? And someone has a microphone right here for you.
Hello, Congressman. My name is James Davis. I'm from Lynchburg, Virginia. I represent Old Dominion Job Corps, and I was just wondering, and first of all, I appreciate everything you've done for Job Corps, and you've met with our students many times. Our concern is two. Number one, the closure of Job Corps. About 40% of our students come from the Norfolk area. We have our office on Center Drive in Norfolk area, and so my concern is this: with the trades being what they are, what can we do as Job Corps to help save those young people from experiencing some of the things we've seen now?
The administration decided front Job Corps pretty much cold turkey a couple of weeks ago. They were sued. Court said, no, you can't stop running programs that have been properly authorized. Posture, the programs can continue until further notice. We know that the programs work. You indicated that a lot of students in Lynchburg are from Norfolk. A lot of the programs, when the students sign up, they get room and board as well as job skills. And and you just wonder where they would be but for that room and board. So the costs per student are higher than other job training programs, because other job training programs don't include room and board. But the people we're talking about are those that really need the help. And but for Job Corps would be on a trajectory that's unemployment, prison, a lot of other problems. The Job Corps has been studied, has been very successful, and has strong bipartisan support. The Secretary of Labor was before several committees defending the budget, and one of the questions frequently she had to answer was about Job Corps. They are going to fight it out in court, but the present status is that they have to continue the programs until further notice.
Now, Wayne Davis of Portsmouth. The next two are David King of Norfolk and Carol Erickson of Norfolk. Please be ready with your question. Wayne Davis.
Congressman, we Democrats are angry and fear for our country. It's hard to find justice in our country, given that our former Justice Department has become the Department of Injustice. Intimidation is rampant, with the arrest of a mayor, a member of Congress, and a judge, and of course, a senator recently driven to the ground and handcuffed. Every American is at risk of this lawless administration. We are afraid for our country and very angry and looking for leadership. With respect, when might you get as angry as the 5 million people who protested on Saturday and go after Trump with fierceness, and Speaker Johnson also, and all of your Republican colleagues, fierceness akin to that demonstrated by your colleague, Ms. Jasmine Crockett of Texas?
One of the problems we have is that Congress works as a unit. And when a majority doesn't want to do anything, it's kind of hard for Congress to do anything. We can't get the other side to even ask a question. You mentioned the senator. I think if you can ask them questions, if they weren't so sure the questions might be asked, they wouldn't have done it. Because, quite frankly, the secretary should have been in a witness chair within 24 hours explaining what was going on. But we can't get the Republicans to even ask a question. I mean, it's so bad. There used to be a process called resolution of inquiry, which is essentially, I move we ask this question. All in favor say aye, all opposed say no. And each committee has that prerogative for questions that may pertain to their jurisdiction. They vote no, not even ask the question. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would just suggest that you take that message to the press, to the public. Our citizens don't know how awful this bill is. They don't know. So don't talk to your colleagues except to castigate them and raise some of them. Talk to the public through the press and just hammer Trump every day.
I gotta tell you, you're frustrated with the press, I'm frustrated with the press, and the press, quite frankly, is frustrated with itself. You've got several of the major networks who have settled cases with Donald Trump, cases that I think most lawyers would say, they didn't have a case, why are you paying these people money? They're afraid of what could happen. So when we have news and tell the news, it doesn't get covered. One of the questions I had was, what was Doge and Elon Musk doing in the Department of Labor computer system? Now, first of all, Elon Musk and his companies are under active investigation by several agencies within the Department of Labor. NLRB, OSHA, some others. Did he have access to the investigation files? Yes. Where you can find out the names of the confidential witnesses? did he have access to sensitive information like jobs numbers before they become public? And he's got a lot of contracts. If he's bidding on a contract, could he see his competitors' bids before he has to bid? Just ask it. You think they answered? As a matter of fact, when the Secretary of Labor was there, I asked her if she was aware of any agencies within the Department of Labor that are investigating Elon Musk, and she said no. Did you see that covered? I mean, how does something like that not get covered when, in fact, there are at least 3 agencies under her purview actively investigating him for unfair labor practices, unsafe workplaces, discrimination? How can she not know? And how can Doge be all over the Department of Labor and she not know that the person running it is under investigation? Okay. Did that get covered?
Well, Jasmine Crockett gets on the news every day raising hell with it, and we hear about that.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna go to the next question. Thank you so much. Over here, we have Carol Erickson.
Hi, good evening. What else is it gonna take for us to get this man impeached?
it takes the majority of the House and 2/3 of the Senate. And so, I mean, if you can count, if you can't get these people to even ask a question, you can't get it on the House agenda. And if you look at what we are focusing on is making sure that the courts are doing their jobs. He is under active investigation, an active injunction, at least 50 injunctions. Hundreds of lawsuits have been filed. The House Democrats have a litigation task force where every time someone brings a case or every time a case needs to be brought, we are there with briefs to help the court, doing everything we can to side on the side of those who are trying to slow them up. We're doing everything we can effectively, not just talking about it, but actually doing it.
David King next. David King. Right here. Right, David King. And then after David King, we have Natalie S. out of Norfolk and Rebecca Kent out of Portsmouth. So please be ready. Natalie S. out of Norfolk and Rebecca Kent out of Portsmouth. Mr. David King.
Okay. Good evening, Congressman. How are you doing today?
Doing okay so far.
Are you ready for a fight?
We've been fighting for the last 6 months.
Okay. With this DEI programs that the president has sliced over the months, what are your thoughts on that? Do we need diversity in this country? We just coming out of the civil rights era. And I think a lot of people don't understand why we have that in place. Could you?
Well, you're saying we're just coming out of the civil rights era and we made progress to get to where we are. The question is whether we're going to continue going forward or going backwards. Diversity, I mean, it's just hard to imagine in 2025 people coming out against diversity. I mean, in the 1960s, people that were against diversity were segregationists. And I mean, if you're not for diversity, what are you? You must be for segregation. And equity. I mean, how are you going to be against equity? Those that come out against equity are only proving the old adage that for those used to privilege, equality seems like oppression. And if you're against inclusion, I mean, the whole point of the civil rights anti-discrimination laws are to enforce inclusion. You can't exclude people. So when you come out against DEI with the enthusiasm that we're seeing today, you're seeing attacks on fundamental civil rights that we haven't seen since the 1960s. So, if you want to know my views on it, we have to make sure that they don't get their way, and they're trying to do it by some ways that just you haven't seen before. For example, the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunities Commission. He has fired enough commissioners so it doesn't have a quorum, so it can't operate. So how are you going to have a discrimination case without an EEOC? We're having, I mean, they're doing stuff that for which there's just no precedence at all. No commissioner of the EEOC has ever been fired before the term ends, since the EEOC started half a century ago. So in terms of DEI, yeah, we're having to fight like we haven't fought before in history, and they're not even bothering to change the laws. They're just dismantling stuff and threatening people. Now, I'm not saying it was because of, but I just point out that Verizon had a diversity program that they got rid of, and then they got a major federal contract. That's what we're dealing with.
Thank you so much. We have next Natalie S. out of Norfolk and Rebecca Kent out of Portsmouth. But before they come, I'd like to also recognize two of our state officials. Our delegate, Jackie Glass. Delegate Jackie Glass is here. And then the senator for the city of Norfolk, Senator Angela Williams-Gray. Senator.
Good evening. My name is Natalie Simmons. My question is, everything that is going on and that Donald Trump is doing that's bad, do you think that it's going to lead to us going to a revolution, or he's going to be overthrown? Meaning that he's got to be thrown out of office.
Well, when the nation started and the Constitution was written and Ben Franklin came out of the doors, somebody asked Mr. Franklin, what do we have, a monarchy or a republic? And he said, a republic if you can keep it. And we've kept it for 250 some years, and it's being threatened. And so we have to make sure we vote with the right people in office. And the idea that you have people that won't even ask a question. The checks and balances are important because just the way nature, the president, Congress, Supreme Court, if one branch of government starts to absorb a little more power than it's supposed to, the other two branches can check. If you got a majority of Congress that won't even ask a question as the president is absorbing unto himself more and more powers, and to show how it works, there's the war powers. Only Congress can declare war, but we haven't really asserted that power. Since before the Vietnam War. And so the president kind of has gotten that. Then tariffs, same thing. The president doesn't have any power to impose tariffs. And we can get it back if we say something. But if a majority of Congress is going to sneak through it, he's going to kind of absorb that power too. And so it's important that you put people in office that will stand up for the prerogatives of the legislative branch and make sure that the powers of the legislative branch and the checks and balances are there. I think there's going to be a challenge because it's obvious that a lot of people in Congress don't care what the president does. And regrettably, it looks like it's a majority.
All right, we have Rebecca Kent, and then after Rebecca Kent, if you could please stand, we have Philip Riddick out of Norfolk and Ethan Martin, Ward's Corner. Philip Riddick out of Norfolk and Ethan Martin out of Ward's Corner. And we also like to thank the mayor of Newport News, Philip Jones, for also being heard as well. Mayor Phillips.
Hello, Congressman. Thank you for being here today. My name is Rebecca. I'm a constituent from Portsmouth. And given the recent deployment of Marines and National Guard troops against civilians in Los Angeles protesting illegal ICE raids, including the use of tear gas on people in their vehicles to stop video recording, what will your office do to protect our district from the militarization of law enforcement and unlawful ICE actions? How will you defend the rights of immigrants and peaceful protesters and ensure that our First and Fourth Amendment rights are upheld under an increasingly authoritarian presidency?
I served in the Massachusetts National Guard during the Vietnam War. And so we were called to the armory several times to deal with protests, but never called out in the streets. I think we saw what happened, and the Vietnam War pretty much came to an end after Kent State, when the National Guard started shooting people. That's when I think I knew the war effort was coming to an end, because people would not tolerate that. I don't think, all the reports I've heard is that the disruption in Los Angeles was less than it would have been if one of the ball teams had won a championship. That you did not need the National Guard, that the National Guard and federal agents were actually making things worse rather than better. The governor and the mayor said so, and so I think you're just making things worse if you're not working with the mayor and the governor. You have checks and balances, you have the judiciary, and you have your state legislators. Your state legislators could convene and cut off some money. There are things that you can do if the three branches would act like they have some power. If the governor's going overboard, and we have a very, legislature's usually not in session, but they can convene themselves and start taking some action. If you have a governor, if you have an executive that's going to be a rogue individual, you're going to have a problem, but you've got to use your other two branches to help. Right now, the last order that was given was that the local court said that the calling out of the National Guard was illegal. The appellate court put that on hold, so it's still under litigation whether or not the president even had the authority. And it's a fairly vast authority to nationalize to federalize the National Guard. But the district court said that he'd gone overboard even with his broad authority. We have to support the courts to make sure that he's within bounds. But when you elect the wrong people, bad things can happen. Elections have consequences. You've got there's an election tomorrow where you can make Democratic primaries, a couple of Republican primaries, and in November we'll have an opportunity in House of Delegates and statewide offices to make sure we elect some good people.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, again, like I said, you have three branches. The judicial branch ruled that he was overboard and was illegal. Now, the appellate court has had that on hold, and that process is still going on. But the legislative branch could say something, but the majority in Congress will not even ask a question about what's going on.
Well, thank you so much. We have to get to other questions, but thank you so much. All right, now we have a question in the back. Thank you so much. We have a question in the back.
Hello, Congressman Scott. How are you? How are you?
Who's that, Angelo?
This is Ethan Martin. How are you, sir?
Okay, Ethan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing fine. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm sure that your staffers I hold a special place in their hearts for all the phone calls that I've made. Congressman Scott, we need your voice to be heard so that our voices can be heard. You made many points tonight that the legacy media is not listening. And you're right. One guy from ABC, Moran, spoke up and they fired him. ABC. So we need you to be out of the box so that you can be heard, so that we can be heard. So go to places like Midas Touch. I'm sure they'd love to speak to you. Go to the Lincoln Project. Go to alternative areas so that you can be heard. We're tired. You hear our frustration. We love you. We voted for you. Yes? You have our support. And you will have our support, and you will continue to have our support. But hear our frustration. Because if you're frustrated that you can't be heard, think of how frustrated we are. Because we need you to hear us and be our champion. So here's some thank you. So please, look for alternative ways to be heard. Answer us when we talk to you on social media. I can't tell you how many Twitters, tweets, Facebooks, Instagrams. I've never heard an answer to any question that I put on social media. And I'm one of your biggest supporters. So please, go to these areas. And when you go on a media and you say, hey, I speak to my Republican colleagues, I speak across the aisle, they come up to me and you should hear what they say behind the scenes. We don't want them to be behind the scenes anymore. Why do they get the privilege of coming to you guys behind the scenes and saying, oh, we don't agree with any of this, but then they go on Fox News and gaslight? But you guys give them safe haven. They don't deserve that safe space to lie and gaslight anymore.
Thank you very much.
I'll take issue with the idea that we're giving them free rein. They don't come up to us and say they're embarrassed. I haven't heard any of them say they were embarrassed about a bill that has tax cuts for the wealthy and pays for it with cuts in Medicaid, SNAP, and access to college. They don't, not the least bit embarrassed.
With all due respect, I've heard Senator Kane, I've heard Mark Warner come on to the MSNBC, other news shows and say, well, people come up to me behind the scenes.
Well, maybe they do in the Senate, but they don't in the House. They don't in the House. They don't show any embarrassment at all about what's right behind the scenes. And when's the last time any of them had a town hall meeting? To answer a question.
Thank you very much.
They're embarrassing to watch. And we came out with 5 to 10 million strong this weekend. And we were louder, and we were not squeaky like the wheels of those tanks that were flying. We heard. We want to empower you. We want to help you.
Well, if you got some outlets that want to hear from me, if you got some outlets that want to hear from me, I was on Tampa Valley this afternoon.
I guarantee you, if you go to Midas Touch and say, hey, I'm Congressman Bobby Scott, and I want to talk to you, you will have an interview within 48 hours.
Ethan, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mr. Philip Reddick.
Good evening, Senator Scott. Philip Reddick of Norfolk. I have a question. My question is the Democratic Party presently doing anything to come up with any future laws, or either strategies to prevent anything of this nature from happening again?
And say again,
Are the Democratic Party presently putting any strategies or laws in place, working on, getting those type of things in place to prevent any future, president from doing this type of thing again?
we are trying to preserve what we've got. Most of the efforts, frankly, are defensive. You've seen what they're trying to do. We've got health care. We've got the lowest percentage of Americans uninsured in the history of the United States. And their reaction is to cut Medicaid and cut the Affordable Care Act. So 16 million additional people will lose their health insurance. We're trying to improve education and preserve the Department of Education. They're trying to dismantle the Department of Education. And let me just say this about the Department of Education. They talk about the test scores are low and therefore they have to get rid of the Department of Education. Let me tell you, the Federal Department of Education has nothing to do with test scores. All of the curriculum, teacher quality, and all of that, that's local and state. What the federal government does with the Department of Education is basically a civil rights operation. It means to get so you can have access and to eliminate discrimination within it. Title I of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act is money to low-income areas because we fund education with the real estate tax. Obviously, low-income areas will be at a disadvantage. So Title I puts money into low-income areas. We have Individuals with Disabilities Education Act to make sure that children with disabilities get a free and appropriate education. Those are English as a second language and racial achievement gaps. Make sure that those are eliminated. All of the other stuff is local and state. We just make sure that everybody has access to the education without discrimination. On higher education, we don't tell colleges what to teach. We just make sure that the kids can get into college because we provide Pell Grants and student loans. But we don't tell them what to teach. So when you talk about abolishing the Department of Education, we are trying to keep it so that everybody has equal access. Now, that's going to be a challenge, particularly in light of the fact that in his first term, President Trump appointed dozens of judges who, during their confirmation hearings, would not say whether or not Brown v. Board of Education was properly decided when it struck down segregation in public schools. Like there's something we got to debate. So we're debating a lot of things that we thought were settled law. Like you can't segregate students, racially segregate students in public schools. Dozens of judges are now on the bench that would not say whether or not that decision was properly decided. So there are a lot of things that we're working to try to preserve, but they are very aggressive, particularly going after civil rights that we have maintained and made gains on over the last century.
Thank you so much. We have so much interest, and this is great because the engagement is good. We want the same engagement at the voters' polls this Tuesday and November 4th, right? Because elections have consequences. We have a chance for two more questions. Sharon Jones of Norfolk and Coleman Young of Portsmouth. Sharon Jones of Norfolk, Coleman Jones of Portsmouth. Are you here? All right, if you could stand so we can get to you. And we ask that you be brief to your question, and also, if not, I'm going to play the bad guy. I'm going to cut you off.
I got you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman, for being here tonight and fielding our questions and our frustrations. Aside from writing letters and forwarding form letters to our representatives and marching with no kings and, hands off, all that, what actually can we do that will affect some change? And please don't just say, go to the polls, because there's got to be something else. I mean, aside from storming the Bastille, what can we as regular people do? Not just give you money, not just write you letters, not just vote, but what else is there? Is there some way that people like yourself can engage, shame, call out people in other divisions, in other, I don't know, across the aisle? What else is there? Thank you.
Okay, first of all of what you said, yeah, you gotta do that. But you gotta remember that elections have consequences. When the wrong people get in, they get to govern, and you can yell at them if you want. If they are who they are, it's gonna have consequences. The right people get in, and you just look at the difference between the first major piece of legislation that passed the House, this big bad bill that they promoted, tax cuts for the wealthy, cuts in Medicaid, SNAP, and college affordability, and the American Rescue Plan Act, which during inflation put money in people's pockets, biggest investment in K through 12 education in the history of the United States, helped colleges, supported child care. 1 million people were about to lose their pensions under the multi-employer pension fund. We saved the pensions, reduced healthcare costs. I mean, just a stark difference, and that's just a couple of people difference. We had about a 4-vote majority 4 years ago. They've had about a 4-vote majority now, and you can see the difference that elections make. But in addition to that, make sure you're active in organizations. Individuals, it's hard to make that much of an impact, but when organizations get active, it makes a much more important difference. When the marches can make a difference, but frankly, I don't think they're impressed, the other side is impressed by people marching. What they're impressed about is an indication that they won't be elected next time. Now, part of the problem is the primary arithmetic in a primary. Because if, say, you get Donald Trump down to about 35% support, a Republican might look at that and say, he's got 70% of our half. That's the primary vote. And to get the nomination, that's what you gotta go through. And that's tough. So you really have to make sure you do something in the general election, because their first step is primary, and when Trump and others threaten them, they're looking at somebody threatening them with even if they're down to 35%, with a 70% support in a primary. You saw what they did to Liz Cheney in a primary. So when they come after you, you know, it can be tough. But make sure the organizations, all of the organizations, look at, when you're reading a paper, find some organization filed a lawsuit and successfully filed a lawsuit. Well, you know they need support and money, and you might get a local affiliate of that organization. But working within organizations is so much more valuable than individuals trying to figure out what to do. You can just imagine all the different organizations that are advocating for the things that you're interested in. Get involved in those organizations and bring your friends too.
Thanks so much. Last question, Coleman Young of Portsmouth.
Yes, Mr. Scott. I appreciate, I want to commend you because you're very accessible in public and well versed on every issue there is. My question is, how high does the debt have to get before it jeopardizes the credibility of the country, where other countries will not loan us money, and if they do loan us money, they want an increased interest rate, which would be additional money coming out of the budget.
I'm not sure I understood the question. Yes.
But there's an issue or start a concern that the debt is getting higher and higher. That other countries or start to get worried that our credibility of being able to pay, it would cause them to want a higher interest rate on loaning money to us. So that would take more money out of the budget, cut back on government programs.
That is a real concern. It hasn't happened yet, but with the bills that have been introduced where we actually increase the deficit by trillions of dollars, it makes it more likely. The rating agencies, S&P, Moody's, and those have downgraded government debt, which tends to increase the interest rate. Right now, we're paying more in interest on the national debt than we are on national defense. And it doesn't have to be that way. As I said, on Democratic administrations, we're able to reduce the deficit. One of the first big votes I cast as a member of Congress was on Clinton's budget, which by the time he left office had a surplus in the budget, a surplus big enough but to pay off the entire debt held by the public by 2008. The entire debt, no debt. Put money back in the trust funds by 2013. But we came back, President George W. Bush came in, won 2 wars without paying for it, 2 big tax cuts without paying for it, $500 billion prescriptive drug benefit, not paid for, and all of a sudden, we're back in the ditch. But we can, if we stop making speeches and start doing arithmetic, we can get the budget under control, but you can't do it with people that show no appreciation for arithmetic. When is the first Republican, you've heard these guys say, well, the budget has got this big deficit, we didn't cut Medicaid enough. When's the last Republican you said, well, we cut taxes too much? $4.5 trillion. Cut taxes. Maybe if you didn't cut taxes as much, you wouldn't have as big a deficit. As a matter of fact, if you left the taxes where they were, when the jobs, you were creating more jobs, you could get back into a surplus, pay off the national debt, and not have the risk of foreign countries, investors in foreign countries deciding, you know, maybe this debt is a little more dangerous, maybe they're not going to pay it. Particularly when you get some Republicans talking about not increasing the debt ceiling, shutting down government, things like that, that can have devastating effects on the budget. But the idea that foreign investors or even domestic investors might want a little bit higher interest rate because of the irresponsibility of the budgeting is a real risk. And if that happens, we're going to be paying even more interest on the national debt than we're paying today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Congressman Scott. Thank you so much. Let's give him a hand, everyone. Once again, elections have consequences. I'm sorry, sir, we're out of time for questions, but if you have any questions right now.
I voted for Mr. Scott, and I just want to say something. I voted for Mr. Scott, and I voted for Tim Kaine, and I voted for Mark Warner. And I wanted to come and sit down and talk with them at their office, because the court has failed me.
Okay.
These judges
Well,
have failed me.
well, once
And I
again,
wanted to talk with them, but they would not talk with me.
all right, well, hold on one second. What we'll do,
Have you talked to one of the people in the office?
No, I done been there, Mr. Scott. I wanted to talk to you, or either Tim Kaine, or either Mark Warner. And neither one, Mark Warner sent me a letter and told me that I was out of his jurisdiction. But yet and still, this senator can go out of the country for immigrants to help him. But can't neither one of y'all talk to me.
well, thank you, sir. Hold on one second.
That's not right.
Okay, if it's
I'm a taxpayer and I'm a small business.
okay.
You understand me? I've been in business for 20 years.
If you give us a call, but if it's a matter involving court, I'm not court.
I need to go before Congress because the judges in this country, they don't need to be judged. They don't need to be judged.
Well, again, thank
They
you.
discriminated against me. They violated my human rights, my civil rights. What good is June 16th or June 19th, or June 18th? What is good is civil rights? What good is it?
Deal with it. Give us a call.
Well, again, very quickly, what I say is, again, elections have consequences. When you have your U.S. Congressman, our U.S. Congressman, holding town halls and talking to another side doesn't, it shows that he's here for you. So again, thank you so much. You will give us some information here.